Hi there, here is Christina from Changing Parenting. And did it ever happen to you that someone told you you are softening up your kid, that, the way you're parenting, they will never make it in the real world? You need to force them to do things they don't want to do because in the real world, they will need to do things they don't want to do, and they will never survive the real world because, you're just making everything easier for them. If that ever happened to you, then this video is for you. Because very often what happens in parenting is that we actually start out by wanting to support our children, wanting to be there for them, wanting to, empathize, all those things, because they are the people we love the most in the whole world, right? But what happens is that it gets passed on from generation to generation, that the worst thing you can do is spoil your kids. And the definition of spoiling is not, it's about showing too much love, right? Which is not at all what spoiling means. Because spoiling means to, not having firm boundaries and just let your kids do whatever they want and not giving them structure, right? So it's not at all. Spoiling is when your child throws a tantrum and you give them the toy they want to stop the tantrum. That's spoiling, right? But empathizing, supporting, helping them, that's not spoiling at all. That's good parenting. And I'm going to show you what happens when you force your kids and why you shouldn't force your kids, why your instincts not to punish, not to force your kids are actually correct. And these things that get passed on from generation to generation and that are a general thing in society of like, you need to do tough love to give them tough love so that you prepare them for the real world. Why that's actually doesn't make any sense. And I'm going to show you this, why exactly, and then also the studies that support this, because this is not just my opinion, this is real facts. So what happens when we force kids? First of all, they start associating these tasks with feelings of shame, of fear, and resistance, right? Because every time that they need to brush their teeth, every time that they need to do their homework, every time that they need to do these things that are unpleasant for them, they become even more unpleasant, because it's not just about the feeling that they have internally of like, I would prefer to play than to brush my teeth. I would prefer to go outside than to do my homework. It starts being like, whenever it's time to brush my teeth, whenever it's time to do my homework, bad things are going to happen to me. My parents are going to scream at me. They will threaten me. I might get punished. It starts being so, something that starts like this becomes like this huge thing. And they start fearing this. And this age 3 to 6, I specialize in ages 3 to 6, is when children form their core beliefs. And you don't want them to have as their core belief that activity is something they should be, that they should fear, or that it's something that they should be ashamed of, that they are not able to do it, or that it's something that they need to fight against it, or bad things will happen, right? So that's one thing. The other thing is that it actually happens the opposite of what it's intended. So the idea is like, you need to make them do it so that they know, that they have to do hard things. But what they actually learn is to disconnect. It's to rebel. So they learn that every time that I'm in discomfort, every time that bad things are happening, hard things are happening, there will be danger. Even worse things will come, right? So either I need to blindly obey without questioning. And by the way, you might even wonder why this gets perpetuated from generation to generation, right? Because society wants people who obey and comply without asking, right? So, but that was an aside. So either they learn that, whenever there's something hard happening in their lives, they need to comply without questioning. So they rely on external compliance, not internal motivation, which means that or they rebel against this external force, right? Because they're like, it's that fight or flight, right? Fight, freeze, or flight mode, right? And when you rely on external compliance instead of internal motivation, and I talked already about this a lot in my previous videos, what happens is that if you are not there, if there's no one there to force them to do something, they have absolutely no reason to do it, unless they fear that you will find out that they didn't do it. But they'll get really good at hiding things from you. They get really good at, you're actually getting the opposite of what you actually intended in the first place. And another thing is that they miss out on real problem-solving skills. And the reason for that is that when children are in this fear, fight, flight mode, what happens is that their prefrontal cortex of their brain, which is the part that thinks, gets suppressed, and their amygdala, which is the fear center, takes over. So they are not learning, how do I do this? How do I tie my shoes? What's the best way to tie my shoes? They are learning, what can I do right now to stop my mom from yelling, right? So you're actually preventing them from developing problem-solving skills, right? So this is actually really, not only doesn't it achieve what you want it to achieve, but it actually makes the problem so much worse. So I'm going now to go over some studies very briefly, just for you to understand. So there was, for instance, this study where the kids were playing learning games, and there were two groups. On one group, the parents were really supportive and saying, hey, you're doing a great job and keep trying and you can do it. And in the other group, the parents were really controlling. They were constantly correcting, no, it's not this piece, it's that piece. They were constantly forcing their kids, you will do this right now. Just do it or you'll get grounded. You cannot eat dessert or whatever. And whenever their child tried to give ideas, they would just ignore their child's ideas, right? So this was on purpose. And what happened was that the group of the controlled kids, they made a lot more mistakes. Even though their parents were actually constantly correcting them, they were constantly making mistakes. They gave up much faster than the other group. They just didn't want to continue, right? And they showed less interest in making. So then afterwards, they gave them very easy puzzles to make that the kids already could do by themselves, and the kids didn't even want to do them. The ones who tried to do them, they couldn't do them, right? Because when you are forcing your kids, when you're over-controlling, it shuts down this learning process. Again, you don't have access to those problem-solving skills, right? The children become less confident. They are much less likely to persist on doing things. They are less motivated. They don't have that internal motivation. They will avoid doing that, even if before they used to have fun with it. Look at another study. In this study, the kids were given unsolvable puzzles. So the puzzles were really, you couldn't solve them. That was on purpose. And again, the kids were divided in two. One group was pressured and criticized constantly. The other one, they were supported, they were given choices, they were helped through the process. What happened? The kids that were pressured, they became having this feeling of helplessness. And again, later on when they got the easy puzzles, they also didn't want to do them. They also couldn't do them. So it's very similar. Different studies pointing to the exact same thing. When kids are forced, when they feel like they have no control, they don't build resilience. They actually get the opposite of resilience, because even when they are capable, even when they are presented with things that they can do, they still feel powerless. They still feel like they cannot do it. It's learned helplessness, right? It's not what you want to do. Another one, 100 studies. They studied what happens when you are trying to control kids. And what happened was that those kids had a huge drop in intrinsic motivation. They couldn't do things unless someone was forcing them. So forcing someone doesn't teach life skills. It teaches dependence. They don't learn how to do the hard things. They learn how to wait for instructions. That's not what you want at all, right? So what can help your child build resilience? Feel seen, feel supported. Help them feel like they are in control even when the task is uncontrollable. Give them choices. Set boundaries, but stay connected, stay empathized. Celebrate the effort, not the obedience. It's not about, hey, you're doing a great job. It's about you're doing a great job, not good job at the end, right? It's the process, not the destination. If you're struggling with this, let me know below what's happening and I'll point you in the right direction.